My dear friends, I hope this finds you well once again. I was listening recently to a podcast with Jordan Peterson, of all people, and he was talking about how people who are creative tend to be progressive in their politics. And it's an interesting sort of theory, and this is something that I think that I've been thinking a lot about recently. The kind of personality types that move people to look at the world a certain way. We've spoken a lot in the past about Jonathan Haidt, about, he has those certain kind of foundations that of moral values that different people have in different ways, and there are certain foundations that some people place of more, in more importance than others. That's just kind of their personality, and that moves people to look at the world a certain way. And it doesn't necessarily make one better than the other. It's just a certain prioritization of values. And so too, you think about creative people. I want you to think about the really creative people in your life. This doesn't mean that all creative people are progressive, and it doesn't mean that people who are conservative are not progressive, are not creative. But when I think about the people who are really the creative types in my life, certainly artists and musicians, by and large, they tend to be more progressive in their political values. And it might be that some of you will take offense to that and say, no, that's not the case. And you might say, I don't know, let me know what you think. It's certainly an interesting sort of theory. Jordan Peterson was talking about how people who are creative are able to make, that definitions are not as set and boundaries are not as clear, and they can kind of make correlation and connections between all these different sort of things that people are more conservative. They don't necessarily see things a certain way, and it's traditional, this is how it is, whereas people who are creative tend to be a bit more expansive. And that's an oversimplification, and there's a lot there. I think that's what Jordan Peterson's really spent a lot of his life exploring, is these personality types. But it is a fascinating concept because I was thinking about rabbinic tradition is by and large, generally speaking, a very conservative with a small c tradition, trying to conserve what was and trying to maintain this, maintain our connection to our history and our Torah, and that keeps things together. But there is a certain creativity within it. Certainly rabbinic, if you read any rabbinic text, there is incredible creativity there, and there is also these incredible connections between various different things within a system. I thought that's a really interesting, maybe it's an exception or one of the exceptions to this rule, because again, rabbis are generally speaking quite conservative in their politics, generally speaking, not always, but there is a lot of creativity within that world. This brought up for me the message that comes out of this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha, of course, tells the story of Yitzchak, but it doesn't really tell the story of Yitzchak. It says, Parshat Toldot Yitzchak, right? These are the chronicles of Yitzchak. And then it goes on to say, Avraham holidet Yitzchak. Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. And then it goes on, doesn't really tell us that much about the story, the life of Yitzchak. He doesn't seemingly do much. And that which he does do, it in many ways is just kind of like a continuation of what his father did. He went, most telling is, of course, him digging up the wells that his father had dug and then the Plishtim had covered over. He redigs those wells, and he calls them by the names that his father called them. So on one hand, you can kind of see him as this very, strict traditionalist. He's doing exactly what he was, what his father did. He just did it again. And there's a value to that. But on the other hand, the Sfat Emet says that, yes, Avraham did these things and Yitzchak did them again, but Yitzchak did them in his own way. Yitzchak did them, using his qualities. Who he was, he invested within that. I saw a nice idea of Yitzchak as kind of being compared to, someone who draws beautifully in those, coloring books, inside the lines. So there's a certain set structure, and not making anything new per se, but making something beautiful within the set structures that already exist. And so there are multiple types of creativity. Maybe that's what we would call creativity with a small c. Not being incredibly expansive, not blazing new paths, but yet making connections and solving problems in one's own unique way. And I think we need these different types of creativity in the world. And this is part of the real challenge that I'm finding myself within this polarization, which we've spoken about a lot in the past. We have people who are profoundly creative and make these intense connections and want to break boundaries, what Rav Kook would call the souls of chaos. People try to tear things down and say, no, like this has been all wrong and look where this has got us and all these mistakes and let's do this and let's do that and a million ideas. And there's something really refreshing and powerful about that, not necessarily so pragmatic. And on the other hand, you have people a bit more conservative and kind of color within the lines. And so they can't necessarily solve age-old issues, but they can get things done in a certain way. And so again, these being very, simplistic, but we see these sorts of structures that exist within the world, and we need all of them. We need the Avrahams, right? The Avrahams who blaze new paths and find new ways to serve God. And we need the Yitzchaks, those people who can serve and are traditionalists, but do it with their own spirit. And this is kind of the world. We need that sort of that harmony and that balance. And so my blessing is that we can all bring out our own qualities, our own creativity, to continue to grow and expand within our own abilities, to honor other people and to honor and respect other approaches to this world. And together, as humanity, if we can just come together and to create dialogue and conversation to be able to solve and work on those things that ail us as human beings. We can only do this together, and we need each other. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.